Home is where the plant is. Hi, I'm Ian Roofe and welcome to Get Gardening, and in this video we're looking at some of the care and attention that our houseplants might need. Now, they're plants which get mixed reactions, a bit like conifers. Either gardeners love them or gardeners hate them, but houseplants are a really great addition to any home, and they have a number of functions. The first thing is that they're really wonderful at cleaning the air, and there are so many toxins and bad things in our homes that are given off by electronic devices, printer ink and different types of furniture. So having plants in which actually absorb those and clean the air are wonderful things, because we tend to seal ourselves in hermetically sealed homes, and really something like this which takes those toxins out and pumps out lovely fresh air is a wonderful thing. There are also things of great beauty, and if you're like me and you absolutely love plants, then during the winter months, the days are shorter and you can't get out quite so much. So having beautiful foliage and flowering plants in your home is just something that really cheers you up and makes the place look interesting. And they're just wonderful things to grow. There's nothing quite like that if you can't get out to 10 things in the garden. You've got things you can do in the house with houseplants, pottering about, caring for them, watering them, feeding them, and generally making them as happy as possible. Now, I've bought a selection of plants in here that I've got in my own home, and nothing completely outrageous, but all good things which you can grow in your own homes as well. And I just want to take you through some of the sort of basic plants I've got here and where they like to grow. So this is a wonderful foliage plant called Leopard. Beautiful thing, as you can see. Sometimes its common name is the leopard plant, because you can see it's got that wonderful sort of leopard-like print on its foliage. And it's a quirky thing. I mean, it's growing quite nicely here in a clay pot, and it's got this lovely foliage which it will keep right the way through the year. And at certain times through the year, usually late spring, early summer, it will throw out very, very long wands with tiny white flowers on the ends. So it's really quite an attractive plant. It seems to like this clay pot, I think, because the pot breathes really well. It allows the roots to breathe. And I probably couldn't get it out of here because, as you can see at the bottom, it's rooting in quite well. But many of these houseplants don't actually want to be in pots that are too big. They like to be relatively confined and congested. And the only time I will really pot this plant up is if it starts to show signs of stress, like it might not have quite so much leaf and flower on it. But at the minute, as you can see, it's quite full in there of those wonderful stems with that lovely sort of mahogany coloured sort of burgundy finish to it, and really lovely. It's well behaved, it's compact, and it'll look nice on the windowsill. It will tolerate full sun or part shade, and it really is a lovely thing. The thing you've got to be careful of, particularly with Leopard, is their watering, and the old finger touch of the compost is the thing to do. If the top of the compost feels damp, it feels slightly moist, then they're absolutely fine, don't bother with them. And actually, now that we're going into the winter months and light levels are lower, although you've got warmth in your house, I would say you want to dramatically reduce the amount of water that your house plants are getting, because the last thing they want to do is to be too damp around the roots or sitting in any type of water. I mean, most of them are sort of from tropical regions, so they won't like too much water sitting around the roots. But a lovely, lovely thing, and that sits on a north windowsill in my house and does really, really well. The other thing I've got is one of the most robust and well-known of houseplants, and it's Spathiphyllum. It's the peace lily, as you can see, that lovely flower at the top there. Beautiful spath and spadix, which is the spadix is the spiky bit in the middle, and the spath is the white hood around the back. And this is one of the most efficient plants at cleaning the air. It's really very, very, very good. It's great as an office plant in particular. And a lot of research has been done to show that house plants and plants in offices really increase people's sort of happiness at work, productivity, and all-round sort of well-being in the workplace. So things like this are great. And I admit, they're not the most sort of showiest of plants, but there's something quite lovely. Rich, glossy foliage, white flowers that are produced sporadically through the season. And I've just sunk mine into a glossy purple pot, as you can see there. That's quite a nice thing to do. You know, if you are keen on sort of interiors for your home, then, you know, putting it in a pot which sort of adds some colour or maybe complements other sort of colours in your home is really, really very good. And this plant here is in the pot it was bought in, and it's been in this pot for about 1.5 years now. And as you can see, it's doing quite nice. The roots aren't too bad at all. It's not overly congested. It's got a little bit of odd yellowing leaf, but that will happen anyway. And I'll probably think about repotting this in the next 2 or 3 months. I'll probably wait till the spring until the light levels increase. I might even divide it, but I'll just pot it up into a multi-purpose compost into a pot which is slightly bigger. But as you can see, it's really, really happy. And I bought this for about £3, local garden centre or nursery, and it really is doing great things. Now these pots are wonderful. What you've got to watch though, no drainage holes in the bottom, so be careful when you water once again. Now spathiphyllums are very, very thirsty, but I tend not to leave water sitting in the bottom. I'll water it once a week at this time of year, and any excess waters that left I tend to drain that away. I've also got a lovely couple of ferns here. Because I live in an old cottage and the windows are very small and most of my windows face north, I tend to not get a great deal of light, but ferns are absolutely brilliant, and this is one of my favourites. And I must tell you about this one. I bought it in a tiny, tiny 7cm pot as one of those plants you might put in a terrarium. And that was a few years ago, and it's just come on leaps and bounds. And it is a Splenium nidus. It's the bird's nest fern, as you can see. And just look at that foliage. Isn't it lovely? It's glossy. It's got beautiful dark midribs on the back. Really, really nice. And it's just got the most wonderful architectural structure. And like all ferns, it's got that wonderful look. When the new ferns start to unfurl, they've got those wonderful curls on, and they really are great. And it is a great plant, but in my house, because I've got a wood burner, it tends to get very dusty. So at this time of year, every couple of weeks, I wash it with a little bit of milk watered down, just to sort of clean the leaves up, give it a little bit of shine. And as you can see again, it's quite tight in the pot, but it's filled that pot up really, really nicely. Okay, and I tend to keep this a little bit damper. But a clay pot again, and we've talked about clay pots before, they're so good, they allow the roots to breathe, but also I tend to stand this in a saucer and the actual compost and the pot just absorb a little bit of moisture to keep that root zone quite cool. And if you could feel this pot now, you'd feel how cool it is and damp, and that's ideal for this fern to grow in. But just a lovely thing, really good, really architectural, and adds some really good structure to the house. Another one here, this is a lovely one. This is a bit different. This is a Phlebodium fern, and you can see it's got that wonderful, almost sort of metallic blue leaf. It really is fantastic. And once again, this was bought as a terrarium fern in a 7cm pot about 3 years ago. And you can see what this fern actually does, if I can get out of the pot here. Oh, goodness me. This is a bit like the hare's foot fern. It produces these furry little rhizomatous stolon type crowns on the top of the compost. Very, very fibrous. It's typical with these fern roots. They tend to form this sort of thick brown mat. And you can see it's very happy though, because it's got lots and lots of new fronds coming through. You can see them there just emerging. And I'll probably think about potting this up in the spring as well. And as with houseplants, as with other plants in your garden situation, spring is a brilliant time to repot them, because as the light levels increase that are coming through the window, they will naturally put on more growth. They'll actually put on more top growth and more root growth. So spring is a great time to pot them. And a proprietary potting compost, a multi-purpose, is absolutely fine. You can get specialist houseplant compost, but I've never found I've needed them. Other compost will have the right makeup and the right nutrition in them. The only thing I do with all of these plants through the season, is when I'm in the growing season, which will be about March through till October, is that I give them a weekly feed of a houseplant fertiliser. And I'm sure many of you know what's available. I mean, Baby Bio is probably the most well known. There are other brands, but that will be fine. Just a few drops in the watering can. And I tend to water little and often. So when they're growing, I will check them probably every few days, because obviously the windows get warmer, the plants need more to grow. But throughout the autumn and winter season, I'll probably just water maybe once a week or once a fortnight, depending on how they are. But the Phlebodium ferns, there are various different types, are well worth looking out for, because they are excellent things. And one more to finish off with here. beautiful tradescantias. Now tradescantias really grow well in shady windows or further into the house. If you want to have something around fireplaces during the time of the year when they're not being used, they will tolerate the shade beautifully because they're actually ground cover plants in rainforests and in very sort of dark areas. They like it shady and they like the humidity. They will, in the ground, obviously carpet, and they will root, but in a container they will trail down quite beautifully. Very, very easy to propagate if you like them. Just snap that off. Take those lower leaves off. Clean that up. And then we'll just either pop that into a cutting compost, or even easier than that is a very, very small glass on the windowsill and a little bit of water in, and away it'll go. Within a couple of weeks you'll have a brand new plant there and they'll get away quite nicely. These want to be kept a little bit moister because they like those sort of conditions. And what I tend to do with all these sort of plants like the tradescantia, I tend to keep them in a saucer, and during the growing season I'll keep a little bit of water in the bottom, okay? If you have plants like the ferns that you may think, well, my house is quite dry because central heating can be a problem, then if you just put some sharp grit in the bottom of one of these saucers and fill it up with water, and then put your fern on top, what will happen is that the fern won't actually be sitting in the water, but the gravel will keep nice and moist. And as the temperature increases, if you've got heating or a wood burner or a fire, then that moisture will evaporate. And it just increases the humidity around the foliage to keep the plant much, much happier and much, much happier. So of course there are lots of other houseplants you can try. Poinsettias will be about in nurseries and garden centres. Orchids will be a whole new video which we'll look at hopefully later on in the season. But houseplants are really well worth growing because they increase your happiness in the home and make it a happier and healthier place. Dun, 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 dun,
I'm glad you like
me with ginger hair. Strawberry blonde.
So, take it away.
Hang on, what was I saying?